But let's start off talking about the team that a lot of people would have hoped would have made some moves and ended up staying pretty quiet, and that was the Chicago Bulls. They were one of two teams over the course of the trade deadline that did not make a trade. The other team being the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have since already made an acquisition, which we'll get to later. But I'll get your thoughts first, Tyrik. What are your thoughts on the Chicago Bulls not making a move at this year's trade deadline?
Super disappointing. Even if it wasn't like a DeRozan or a Levine or Vooch being moved, you heard talks about like Caruso being out, maybe Kobe White, some players like that, just, rotational guys, but they didn't do anything, which is just highly disappointing because we talked so much within like the last 2 months since the Bulls really started to struggle. Like, what would their direction be? Is it going to be a deadline move, which apparently it wasn't. So now it's all into the offseason. Like, this is a big offseason for this organization moving forward. They got a lot of big decisions to make. So we'll see how that goes. I don't like the idea of trying to bring in Russell Westbrook. I don't know how true those reports were, but they seem pretty valid. Like, Russ was going to decide between, I think it was the Bulls and maybe the Miami Heat or the Clippers or something like that. But I don't like that. It just seems like a lateral move, like you're just trying so hard to be a playing team. It's just, at this point in the year, obviously, like, we talked so much about Lonzo not being able to play this season, which is a big loss. But, even you kind of got to be real with yourself as an organization. And this franchise was not. Maybe the moves weren't there to be made, but I didn't really see much rumblings after, like, the last few weeks about them making any drastic change or any type of rumors or anything. So I'm very disappointed. I think Bulls fans are probably disappointed too. Just they were one of the teams that we felt controlled the deadline, and they did not do anything at all.
Yeah, I don't know how you can be in that situation and just do absolutely nothing. Just looking at this team and what they've done this year, it's really just kind of the drawbacks of buying in, but not to a championship level. It's like they went out, they got some older players in Vooch and DeMar, kind of gave up a lot of assets in doing so. And now they're at this point where, yeah, they got these guys, and that's pretty much their guys, not a ton of flexibility on the roster. And your ceiling is so low. It's like best case scenario with this Bulls roster, they're not going very far. But it's like if they're going to make some moves, they pretty much, I think, would have to start like the full blow up, because I don't really see a way where you retool around this kind of core, especially with a player like Westbrook, and get any higher than like an 8 seed, given the talent that's in this conference right now. So they just kind of seem lost just from an organizational perspective. It's like, are you just going to stick with this and try to be an 8 seed for the foreseeable future? Or are you going to move off these pieces and start over? And if they haven't moved these pieces yet, like, I don't know when they will, but they definitely should have got ahead of the curve, because now they're probably not in the sweepstakes for one of the best picks this offseason. And that's probably just going to be another year of them kind of struggling to get back to where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, the Bulls are in a weird spot where they do kind of have to commit fully to a rebuild, you would think, at least. But even if that wasn't the direction, which is understandable given the fact they did just pay Zach LaVine, they obviously felt good enough that this group could still have success. And understandably so, because they were really good at times last year when they were healthy. Obviously, that's not the case this year. Obviously, they're not playing as well. The offense that's supposed to be great is not as great. You would have at least hoped that they would have made a move or two to try and get some draft equity back, try and have a little bit more flexibility, because they are hurting in the draft equity department right now, which for a team that isn't doing that well and would like to have some first-round picks to start to build back their young core again, you need that coming in. And the other concern is that even if they still want to win, even if they want to keep LaVine because they just locked him up, even if they want to keep DeMar because he's their all-star, Vucevic is in the last year of his deal. And as much as this Bulls team wants to win, or it seemingly wants to win, I still don't see a world where Vucevic is a Chicago Bull next year. It just doesn't seem like a scenario that is likely from A, I don't know how much the Bulls are going to be willing to pay him, and most certainly B, I can't imagine Vucevic is going to be all that keen to coming back to this Bulls team at this point in time in his career. So he's probably going to want to win, and he's not exactly getting any younger, and the Bulls aren't exactly going to be in title contention next year. So that remains to be seen. But not moving him was definitely interesting. But it remains to be seen. Maybe they're waiting for the offseason, maybe some sign-in trades with Vucevic get involved. But I don't like giving out F grades that much at trade deadline or offseason time for moves. But the Bulls are getting a rare F grade from me for how they approach this trade deadline.
I'm going to give them a D- because you brought up a great point. You would have hoped that they would have at least tried to get some draft equity, right? And I think what might have messed them up is the way the market kind of was this year. Like, we saw a lot of second-round picks being thrown around. They were probably being stubborn, like, Caruso's good enough to at least get a first. Maybe it's a late first from the Warriors or something like that, but they probably thought he should be good enough to get us a first, and the offer probably wasn't there, and they didn't want to sell him for second-round picks. Maybe that's what it was. So I'm going to give them a D-, just giving them the benefit of the doubt. But it does look bad on their part that Vooch could potentially walk this offseason, and the stuff that you gave up for him, Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter Jr., and multiple first-round picks, it's looking like one of the worst trades in the last 10 years if Vucevic does decide to walk.
Yeah, I got to go F, man. I think just where they're at, you are in the worst spot to be as an NBA team.
Is it purgatory?
Dare I say, it's like this team was doing so well. And now for about a year, pretty much ever since Lonzo started struggling with injury, it's crazy how much of a needle mover he seems to be now, because from him getting injured around a year ago to the rest of that season and now into this season, this is just not the same team. It doesn't look like they're contending for anything in the playoffs. If they sneak into a play-in, they're probably out first game. But then they didn't make themselves worse either. So it's like, are you trying to get better and compete, or do you want to get worse and try to rebuild? And they did neither, which means what are they going to do? Probably get another like 7th or 8th pick like they seem to always get, and then just kind of retain this mediocrity. Even if Vooch walks, like, how much of a needle mover really is Vooch? If they walk into next year with no Vooch and they still have Zach and DeMar, I feel like they're still probably going to be better than the bottom of the bottom. So they'll probably just still be in that 11 seed type spot. So it's just like you needed to do something and you did nothing. Either try to compete or try to not compete.
I think what's even worse is their pick is top 4 protected, if I'm not mistaken. So
Correct. Yeah.
They're not bad enough to be top 4 unless they magically jump up again. But I don't see that. You don't want to bank on having to jump up. So, yeah, it's not looking good. And it sucks because the Bulls fans just went through like a 5-year rebuild just to get back to the playoffs. And now it's like the next step might be another rebuild if you want your franchise to be relevant anytime soon.
Bought into a low ceiling, man. You went from, buying in to get like DeMar on his 3rd team and Zach LaVine as your guys. Neither of those guys are a number 1 on a contender. I mean, if you want to consider the Raptors with DeMar a contender like 5 years ago, I think that was really good roster construction, really good depth. Neither of those guys with like middling supporting cast is taking you that far.
Was also a much weaker Eastern Conference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like 50 wins would get you a 1 seed those years.
Yeah. All due respect to that Raptors team, as a Raptors fan, they would not have as much success as they did if that team was put in this year's Eastern Conference. There's just no way.
Yeah, that might be a 48-win team.
Yeah, they might be a 4 or a 5 seed as opposed to a 2 or a 1 seed.
Which is a big difference for sure.